Oh, nothing to add. Thank you for everyone who contributed.
We'll see you guys back in the main room. Thank you. And thanks to Lakeisha and Sharon and Cami. Hello, folks. Looks like we've got most people in here, and just want to make sure that our fantastic colleagues, Sarah and Dexter, are in here as well. So thanks, folks, for hanging with us for this final session. I'm really excited to get to participate in this one. You would think that I'd have something to do with it, but I purposefully assigned myself to this breakout because I was really excited and interested to hear from these two colleagues. So a huge thanks to Sarah and to Dex for their willingness to chat. And I believe that you all are going to be doing some screen sharing. So I will stop my screen sharing so that you guys can take over. But Sarah Tracy with the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center, who oversees numerous collaboratives, one of which is a recently formed Biosciences and Pharma collaborative, and Dexter Sullivan from the Michigan Mobility Institute, who will talk about his mobility work. So we're really excited and grateful for you all and your willingness to share. I'll go ahead and stop sharing and let you all take over.
Dexter, do you want to go first?
I can. I don't mind.
Go for it.
Okay. I will go ahead and share my screen here. Just give me 1 second. Okay. I hope everyone's doing well.
I've got to give kudos to you too. Dexter's been traveling today. Most people don't know that, but he slid in here just in time for this. I was so excited to see you pop on.
Well, we had good weather, so that made it a little easier. Well, as was mentioned, I have the pleasure of serving as the program manager for the Michigan Mobility Institute here in Detroit, Michigan, where we are focused on preparing talent for the future of mobility careers. And our collaborative was launched in the fall of 2019. I came onto the team just shortly after that. And since we've been able to make some significant headway with our partners, and the Mobility On-Ramp Collaborative is a group of 4 different employers, as well as a couple dozen community partners as well, including educational institutions. And we are preparing for the launch of our first learning credential that'll be state certified, mobility ready. And this product is in development right now. We've spent a lot of time with employers gathering data to find out what would be the best way to really move something forward for the industry that's going to add value for learning. And as you all are aware, President Biden was here with us yesterday. I wasn't here, actually. I'm just getting back, but I did see the announcement in the news where they were test driving some electrified vehicles. And there's no need to convince Detroiters, Michiganders, and the country, for that matter, that electrification and autonomy in the means of mobility is going to be a major industry here in the city of Detroit and beyond. We like to look at the number need, and I thought that this would be interesting data to share with the group today. In 2019, we facilitated a survey and study with the Boston Consulting Group, and from that, we were able to identify, these are very lean numbers, by the way, that 115,000 new mobility engineers and trade workers would be needed over the decade. And so we really launched our work to begin to solve that problem. The state of Michigan and Governor Gretchen Whitmer have adopted these stats into the official Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. And so they are using this data to inform a number of the mobility initiatives throughout the state and cities around as well. Now, that industry deals with specific mobility engineers. And I was excited to hear all of the talk earlier about engineering, which is definitely an important field. But what we sometimes don't count is that there are additional suppliers and technologists that will be required to support those roles in the technology. So you really see that number multiply in an incredible way. So out of 115,000 jobs nationally, we're going to see about 10%, a little shy of 10% of those in Michigan, not to count for the other 63,000. And if you were to extrapolate that and place that upon the other states, you can see that we're into the millions now of careers coming out of this industry. I always like to share this visual too, and I'll try to be quick here, Sarah, but this is just a little bit on the technology side of mobility. So these are some of the things that we see coming: smart parking, AV shuttles, same day delivery. We're seeing all these commercials now where people are delivering products through the robots, ride share, all kinds of things that are happening. We don't have drones here, but we're in the process of adding a drone company to one of our employers. There are so many technologies coming online that deal with the movement of people and goods, and those technologies create jobs. So we're finding brand new jobs are coming online. They already exist. Right now, there are hundreds of jobs that our employer partners are hiring for today, and those numbers are only growing. So we're doing our very best to make sure that all of the wraparound services are there to support incumbent workers, as well as industry curious workers that want to get into mobility. I also wanted to give a quick review of some of the jobs. Our number one job recruited right now in mobility is software engineering, because there are so many languages and so many parts to the vehicles and to the technologies that are coming online. It requires so much more. So the most competitive hires right now are hardware and mechanical engineers that also understand software. So under the hood, as well as the engines of computers that are driving that hood. And I won't take a lot of time here. We took some time to spend with employers to gather what did they perceive as industry threats and things that need to be addressed in our workforce development credential. And out of that, we understood that a lot of the environments were not providing the necessary supports to make sure that people were being able to learn aggressively. And we're actually changing the term soft skills to critical power skills, as that is our number one requested item to be trained, that people would have those people skills to really be effective long-term. Also, the issue of age distribution. And we saw record numbers of retirements hitting here last year. So there's a large need for us to make sure that we are retaining that knowledge, and as well preparing for gaps in various factors that develop by an aging workforce that is really going through a transition. Of course, TPM has been an amazing tool for us in terms of training and supporting us as we're launching this collaborative work, deploying credentialing. We really see the collaborative and the credential as the solution for a lot of the challenges that are being faced in the mobility industry specifically. And I will breeze through this, Sarah, just a few things on the elements of our credential. It will deliver a certificate. We're looking at doing synchronous and asynchronous learning where people can interact with this material outside of the workplace. And we're focusing on 3 modules: fundamentals in mobility, job skills, as well as those soft skills. And to date, we've convened about 10 institutions that have a high interest in participating in the credential as well. And so that's one way that we're trying to really leverage the strength of the credential, is by involving our local institutions and even including some of their coursework in the job skills module. And this is the last slide I wanted to share, just a little bit on what universities are offering. Some of them have programs that are still in development, but there are significant investments being made in the mobility space as far as higher education in Michigan, especially with us being so involved in the field. And we're starting to see this really broaden in places like Arizona and California, and even some places on the East Coast that have an interest in mobility as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and I'm happy to answer any questions that are had regarding mobility and some of what's happening in terms of workforce development.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dexter. And Sarah, why don't we have you present, and then we can kind of open it up to a broader conversation, and folks can ask specific questions of either of you, and kind of have an open forum.
Sure, that works for me. Thank you so much. Great presentation, Dexter. That was super interesting. Thank you to Jamie and the U.S. Chamber team for inviting us to speak today on what I call my small but mighty biotech collaborative. They too are 4 companies strong, so just over that threshold of of needing at least 3 to keep the information proprietary, but they've stuck in there. They've hung together. I'll walk you kind of through their journey and some of the hiccups or challenges that we faced, and then where they are now. So it is just 4 companies: Catalent Pharma Solutions, Puramal Pharma Solutions, Summit Biosciences, and Neogen. They have made it all the way to Strategy 5, so they are currently working to build solutions. They chose to look at 3 different positions. So I'm going to share the demand for the 3 different positions. And actually, it was kind of fortuitous for them. They started a little later than some of our initial company or our initial collaboratives. When we started TPM in Kentucky, in my head, I thought you have to have one critical job, one critical job. And we have over time learned that you can really focus on more than one if you want to. So they were probably the first collaborative that I really was educated enough to give that option to. And they took full advantage of it and said, we want to look at 3 jobs. We need technicians or operators. And then we also need scientists and microbiologists. So very, very different roles and very different credentials in what they're requiring. So you can see there's a pretty high need at the technician or operator role. You don't see as high of numbers here for scientists or microbiologists. But I think that's what's important to pay attention to as well, is that you don't necessarily have to have high numbers for it to be a critical need, because it can be something that has credentials that are harder to attain. Less people in the population have, what they need to get to that level. So here are the microbiologist credentials as well. When I came back to them with the 3 positions and I said, well, where do we really want to focus our efforts? You can't boil the whole ocean at once. So we all say the workforce phrase there. But I said, where do we really want to focus? Is it on microbiologists? Is that really what you need most? Or is it, do we need to focus on the technicians or operators? So I asked them, for both microbiology or scientists is a little bit more along the chemistry side, but they both require a bachelor's degree, right? Minimum, if not higher. And so I asked them, I said, well, where are you getting them now? What colleges or universities in the area offer those programs? And they went, I don't know. And I thought, well, challenge number 1 accepted. So what I did at the next meeting is I showed them our, and this is just a snapshot of it, it's a lot bigger of a page, the data that you can pull from our Council for Post-Secondary Education of enrollment and graduation rates within programs. So I just pulled the biology, you can pull microbiology, you can pull chemistry. They have a pretty wide variety within those science degrees that they can actually look at, and they're all listed. So I just showed them this website and they kind of went, wow, I had no idea, 1, that this existed, or 2, that I could figure it out myself. It's not a hard website to navigate. So once I showed it to them, the whole meeting shifted from a focus on microbiologists and scientists to technicians. They were like, well, if this exists, I can do this myself. And I will just get on here. I'll look at enrollment and graduation, and I'll, refocus my recruitment efforts with those particular schools. So I thought that was really great that they just went, wow, that's all I need, and I can refocus my efforts. So then we started to talk about that technician and operator role. And to me, I thought, well, they just have to graduate high school, right? They have to be 18, they have to graduate high school. But beyond that, the competencies and credentials weren't too stringent. And so I started to introduce them to some of the manufacturing programs across the state in the high schools, in the CTE programs. And they immediately kind of went, no. We don't need a recent high school graduate. We also don't need someone with a 2-year advanced manufacturing degree. We need someone with a certain level of training, but that, doesn't have to go to that 2-year level. So I just thought, wow, okay, let me try and figure this out. Along the way too, I'll add a couple things. Within the TPM process, we did hit a couple of little hiccups, right? So if you look here at the microbiologist education level, right? What's interesting, what I found is that both for microbiologists and scientists, all of a sudden I saw neither on like they don't have to have high school or they don't have to have a degree of some kind. And I thought, well, that's odd because I know that's required, you know? So I ended up pulling the raw data. So this is kind of a lesson learned in the value of having the ability to look at that raw data in the web tool, pulling the raw data, and it was one company contributing that each time. So I just called her and I said, what's happening here? You don't require a degree for your microbiologist? And she said, oh no, I can see where that looks funny. She said, we here at this physical location, like they have a facility here and that's what she's participating as a part of, but they have facilities in other states and across the country as well. They don't hire for those positions here. So she was contributing neither, thinking, well, we don't have that. But it was an interesting conversation to have. You know, I just hadn't seen it skewed that way before. Additionally, with this group, talent flow was not a thing. It was probably the worst talent flow I'd ever seen. Gosh, love them. They just don't track it. And they were very candid about that. They said, you know, we just don't track it. And I said, well, that's okay. You know, a lot of companies don't necessarily track that, but you know, when they get to this phase of the work, sometimes they do like Survey Monkey and they start to gather that, and they were like, we're not doing that. So talent flow, again, you know, it was funny because where they didn't know where some of their, you know, esteemed colleagues in microbiology or science were coming from, that was a clear indication of why, you know, that wasn't something that they tracked before. So just interesting pieces to the puzzle along the way. So where are they now? Like I said, they kind of shut down the high school thing, although they've opened their minds to it a little more now. But they are building shortened training programs. So I knew that our local community college systems could build customized training programs, but I didn't really know what that looked like either. I knew that the ability was there, but I wasn't sure. So I went to our Bluegrass Community and Technical College and I said, do you guys have anything related to biotech? And they were like, yeah, we have a whole, you know, program, which the collaborative members did not know. And I said, well, how about this? Can you, before we go to them and just say, hey, we've got this great program, here's all we offer, can you compare what you offer in your program to what they're requiring with their competencies? So I just sent them the competency list and ranking that the collaborative had completed. And they built, and I can share this actual document if anyone would like to see it later. But they built this document. Again, this is just a snapshot. Column 1 is the collaborative competencies in order of importance. And then collaboratives 2 and 3 are kind of pieces and parts of 2 different programs they have where they were able to kind of identify, yes, we cover this. Yes, we cover this. And this, being able to take this back, present it, and then like have the employers able to answer questions around it. The BCTC, that's the community college, they kind of presented the whole thing, walked them through, and then answered questions. 2 of the 4 companies are now actually building those customized training programs with them. Actually, one of them is going to start in July, and it's going to be a part of their onboarding process for their new employees. So really cool what they're doing now. The other aspect of what they want to work on that we're just starting to bite off is working to build greater industry awareness. You know, people just don't necessarily know that the biotech industry is here, and that not only can you get a job in it, but you can have a career in it if you want. You know, you can start in that operator and technician role, work your way through a chemistry degree, and become a scientist with that company. So it's a big part of working to build that awareness across the state, and then working to illustrate that career ladder as well. So short and sweet. I am happy to take any questions as well. And I see a lot in the chat. I don't know if they're for me. I'm just looking.
A lot of really fantastic content from both of you. Thank you so much. Lauren had just asked who owns the website, and Lakeisha was kind enough to let us know that it's pulled from your state data system, but I think he was surprised by the way the data is formatted, since it does look pretty user friendly, and that's and very detailed, and that's not necessarily always the case from state data systems. And we know that you all tout your partners. So we will open it up to see if there are any other questions that folks would like to ask of either Sarah or of Dexter. any questions from folks? And I'm actually going to change this too, so that we can all see one another. Maybe by a show of hands, how many people had thought of mobility as an industry prior to today? Me either, and it's so fascinating. But one thing, you know, Dexter, I know that you work for the Michigan Mobility Institute, so clearly you have some experience thinking about mobility as an industry. And Sarah, I don't think that you come necessarily from, I know you have a CTE background, but I don't necessarily think of you as having like a bioscience, pharma level, any level of expertise. So I'm kind of curious in terms of how you all familiarized yourselves with these industries so that you could talk the language of the company partners that you're working with. Maybe Dex could go first and then Sarah.
That's a really great question, Jamie. When I came into the industry, you know, growing up in Detroit, everyone has a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent that works in automotive. But this mobility was an entirely different language. I literally created a spreadsheet with all of the acronyms and try and understand the language of what someone means when they say EV, CAV, and all of the different software languages. You know, it can be rather complicated. And so there are a couple of books that were recommended that were helpful, but more than anything, spending really quality time with employers and hearing their pain points, hearing their wins, spending time, you know, pre-COVID and even some post on site where we're able to actually see the vehicles, see the testing. A lot of that has been really helpful to learning. $150 billion has been invested in mobility since 2018. And so it is a massive industry. Jobs will average anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000. And some of these are entry-level technician roles. As Sarah was alluding to, even some of these careers do not require a degree. Many traditional employers still want to see that degree. If you're in a formal engineering position, you know, it's expected. But there are some, field autonomy engineer, for instance, is one that I love. It's the person that goes out and measures the routes that these electrified vehicles will take, and to make sure that the roads can support that. That role doesn't require a degree. And there are a number of platforms online where people are kind of piecemealing their training. And so we're trying to create a pipeline of learning that is going to be very cohesive and in one place and in one-stop shop. But it is a very interesting and everyday evolving space.
I love that. You did your homework for sure, and now can speak to it as an expert. So that's great. How about for you, Sarah?
You know, it does sound like Dexter's an expert in it. I work with a lot of different industries and I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in any of them. And I think my employers appreciate that fact when I kind of remind them of that. I've learned a lot about healthcare. I've learned a lot about biotech. I've learned a ton about construction, which I knew nothing about. You know, learning about what it is to be a commercial electrician, that's a whole new ball game. Jamie, like you said, my background is in education and CTE, but that was focused in agriculture. So I'm not even in that realm anymore. So I just try to, I have learned a lot and I can speak to a lot of it now, but I also am never remiss of the fact that I'm not the expert in the room and I don't ever pretend to be. And I will, if we hit something and I'm not sure what it is or what it's about, I remind them of that fact. Hey, I'm not the expert in the room, you are. Help me make sure that I'm understanding exactly what you're saying here. And I have found that they're, you know, understanding and appreciative of that fact because they know that, you know, deep down, it doesn't matter if I'm an expert or not, as long as I understand where they want to go with what they're working on and I can move that direction for them, then that's all that matters to them. So that's kind of where I've come from with it.
That's super helpful. And I think a great reminder is that you're not expected to be an expert in these industries. That's not the point of your role. It's meant to facilitate these conversations and get them thinking about things that they wouldn't have, that doesn't require your subject matter expertise on that particular industry. But I think we get a lot of hesitation from TPM practitioners who are like, well, I don't speak the language of IT. I don't speak the language of construction. Like you're not expected to. And that's why sometimes those employer champions can be helpful too, and that they can bring you up to speed or get you steeped in what you need to know. But I think it's great that you're just upfront with them to say, it's your job. You know, that's your role in this conversation, is to bring that level of expertise. I'm here to help you move through a process so that we can address the challenges that you're experiencing. So that's really helpful. But since we only have a minute left, is there any other questions from the group? I think you guys have just mostly gotten a lot of praise in the comments, just in terms of your presentations and your willingness to contribute to the conversation. So any questions from folks? Well, I certainly know that I learned a lot about both pharma and mobility today. So appreciate both of you. And I think what's really exciting is just the emerging industries that are coming about in the TPM network these days. I mean, I think that so often it was construction, manufacturing, healthcare, maybe, you know, to a limited degree, IT, and now we really have industries and collaboratives across the board. And that's really cool because we're learning so much and connect partners. I just had a partner who's not in this room, you know, send me a message and said, is anybody doing cannabis? Is anybody doing tourism? Like I you know, people wanting to connect and explore new industries, and we'll learn from their experiences. And there are consistent themes, you know, from industry to industry. But it's still nice to have that opportunity to connect with others who are working with employers like those that you all are working with. So thank you again so much. Really, really appreciate it. Any other final comments from Sarah and Dexter, just as you think about what it takes to like go into an industry that might be new to you?
Ask questions. I think that the problem solving in the TPM manual is really helpful with that. It even kind of preempts some really good questions to ask and perspectives to take. But getting in there and asking as many questions as you expect the employers to be asking. One of the things too, I love when the employers dialogue. We've gotten to the point in our relationship with employers where now they're showing more interest and they come to us. They request meetings and say, hey, these are things that we want you to include as we're building this out together. So that's the best when it gets to that point.
Yeah, I would just, I love that. Ask questions for sure. I do all the time. And once you get those relationships with the employers, you know, some of them I just call. If I have a thought, I just call them and I'm like, what is this about? But also, like I talked about a couple of hiccups that we hit. Okay, 57 seconds. Good. I thought I was going to get, you know, Zoom whiplash back to the other room. One of the hiccups that I said along the way is, you know, talent flow, our talent flow was useless. Like I will never use it as an example with this collaborative. It just did not, but know that, you know, remember that TPM is a framework and it's flexible and you don't have to have all those answers, and it doesn't have to be this perfect collection of data. The data in strategy 2 really helps build the foundation for the group. But at the same time, when you're going through the process, if something looks a little funny, it can be that way and you can work through it. Just remember that along the way.
So wise, both of you. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And great to see you guys. I really enjoyed getting to see your faces and getting to spend some time with y'all. So see you soon.